at a time. Yeah, this is tea time. Yeah, making a difference. One cup at a time. Tea time. So be sure to grab your tea, grab a seat, and tune in to Miss Liz. Tea time. Making a difference. One cup at a time. Tea time, yeah. Tea time.
Well, welcome back to Tea Time. That's right. We were in the house this afternoon at 3 o'clock, and we had the amazing Catherine M.K. Mitchell in the house, and she spoke about her book. Now I have the incredible David Schein in the house, and we're going to be talking about his book and all of that good stuff and his tea. And his tea tonight is teaching ethics applications. That's right. We serve a different type of tea in Miss Liz's house. We don't serve a beverage, but yes, Miss Liz does have her beverage on the side over here. So before we get started, we're going to get the disclaimer and we're going to get the bio of David and we're going to get David in here. But before we do any of that, we're going to get you to shoot over to Miss Liz's YouTube channel and we're going to get you to subscribe to Miss Liz. We're going to ring that little doorbell so you get notified when we're doing these tea times. And if you'd like to join the live conversations, you're more than welcome to. Miss Liz is streaming right now to 7 different locations. So if you're on that location, join us for the conversation. Bring your questions, your comments, and your support because it all matters in the end. So let's get started with a little bit of disclaimer and bio, and then let's get David in here and let's spill some tea and have some fun tonight with all of you guys on Tea Time with Miss Liz. Disclaimer for Miss Liz's Tea Time live show. Miss Liz myself is going live using StreamYard. Before leaving a comment, please grant StreamYard permission to see your name at StreamYard.com. Please be advised that the content brought forward for any Tea Time show hosted by myself, Miss Liz, is always brought forward in good faith. However, it may bring forth dialogues and opinions that are not representative of my platform. The facts and information are perceived to be accurate at the given time of airing. All Tea Time guests and audience participants are responsible for using their good judgment and taking any action that may relate to the discussion. The content brought forward may include discussions for some where they may be emotionally at risk. It is significant to know that the show is engaging in discussion forums only to offer and inspire awareness and connection and is not providing therapeutical advice. If you have any questions about the disclaimer or the panelist discussion, you may freely contact me, Miss Liz, through my email at bookkeepmissliz@gmail.com. Moving forward, should you choose to voluntarily participate in tonight's show in any aspect, I myself, Miss Liz, welcomes you. And should you decide that the show's not made for you at this time, I respect those wishes and will see you at a later show at a later date and time. Again, all regular Tea Time shows are done on Thursday, 3 p.m. and 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you see a Tea Time on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and even a Friday now, it is a rescheduled tea time, surprise tea time, or a special tea time. But we're counting down because Miss Liz has only got 8 tea times left before we close the doors. So be sure to check out Miss Liz. You can always listen to these tea times in your own time and on your own pace. So now a little bit about my incredible guest. Well, I have Dr. David Schein is an international speaker, best-selling author, tenured professor, attorney, HR consultant, and president of Claremont Management Group Industry. Dr. Schein is the best-selling author of Bad Deal for America 2022 and The Deadline of America 100 Years of Leadership Failures 2018. Analyst of 100 Years of U.S. Presidents from the Wilson to Obama. These men, 8 Democrats and 9 Republicans, have shaped the last century for both America and the world. Schein's profile, their leadership qualities, personal ethics, and professional ethics with unsparing scrutiny while placing them in historical context and assigning a letter grade for compassion. While conservatives radio loves to bash my Ivy League academics, Dr. Schein is an Ivy League graduate and a full-time academic, plus a solid conservative. He has radio experience and hosts the podcast Saving America and Business Law 101. So let me get David in here and we're going to spill some tea together. Welcome, David.
Thank you so much, Miss Liz. I've enjoyed getting to meet you in person, and it's a pleasure to be with you tonight.
Well, it is a pleasure to have you here. I've never had an attorney on Tea Time, so maybe I got to be a good girl tonight.
Well, we try and make sure that we're one of the rational attorneys. What's known of course, I'm a full-time professor today, so I don't do very much legal work, and I don't do any trial work anymore. In fact, earlier today I was at the association that I belong to of dispute resolvers, and those are people who do mediation and arbitrations, because that's a much more efficient way to resolve disputes than to go to court. And unfortunately, we waste, in the United States, we have a very litigious society, and we do waste enormous amounts of money suing each other. And some of it is certainly justified, but a lot of it tends to make the attorneys rich and doesn't necessarily contribute as much to society as we'd like to see. It's kind of turned into a lottery system where a few people win these huge awards, and the rest of us pay for that. And that's, I think, something a lot of people miss, is because of these huge awards is what ends up with our auto insurance and our homeowners insurance being at such high levels, especially in big urban areas. Where I am in Houston, Texas, our insurance rates are very high.
So, and Dr. David, I want to take you back until you were a little guy. What got
Yes.
you into the law and management and all of the business world and everything? So tell us a little bit about who you were as a little guy and who you are now.
I actually, as a little guy, wanted to be a psychiatrist, believe it or not. So I grew up through middle school and high school, planning to go to medical school. And it's actually the subject of the book I'm working on. The current book is called A Cheap Education, and it is a very different book. My first two books were on political management, and this book is a fiction based on fact about my college experience. And so I started at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia as a green college student. Had never been on the college campus until I showed up for the first day of classes. And it was quite a shock for me, coming out of a big family and ending up in a dorm room and in a big city and so forth. So what happened, though, is my very first semester, while I'm trying to adjust all this, I had a work study job. I was a scholarship student, and I was assigned to work with a medical doctor, of all things, and not just to do a little research. I did a little research in the library for him that he was very happy with. But then he said, well, I need help with my patients being tested. So I'm like, well, okay, that's what I'm assigned to do. I guess I'll show up at the hospital and do that. And the testing involved testing people who had gangrene on their feet or their toes. And we were administering a temperature type test to determine if these very damaged limbs could be saved. That was the purpose of the testing. So it's very worthwhile testing, but it was a huge turnoff, and it was very difficult for me to deal with the situation. And so I struggled. I left that job before the end of the first semester, struggled through another semester of pre-med, and about my third semester of college, I said, this is really not working out for me. I've really lost that interest. So I went, believe it or not, to career services at the university, and they tested me and they said, well, you're off the charts to be a lawyer. We don't know if you want to do that, but you're off the charts to be a lawyer. So I said, well, that sounds pretty interesting. And so I very abruptly switched all of my course load. And the positive part was I took all these science courses, so I'd met all my distributional requirements in the first 3 semesters, back when there was a very heavy distributional load of so many science, so many math, so many English. So I was basically free from that point forward to take a lot of business courses. And I ended up with a bachelor's degree in transportation economics. And while I was there doing all that, I started my own business, and I began to really look at the world of business. And that's also when I ended up on public radio with a weekly 1-hour radio program. And all that stuff kind of came together, and I said, I think I want to, definitely go to law school. So that's the bizarre about, it's about as 180 degrees as you can be.
Well, I think that we get these paths, right, where we have to go left sometimes, and we're like, why are we going left when we should be going right? We want to go right, but we're going left, right?
Yes.
So I want to talk about your tea tonight, David. Your tea you gave me is teaching ethics and applications. Why did you give me those three words for your tea?
I made a decision as I finished law school that after about 25 years as an attorney, I would become a teacher. And I felt that we still suffer in the United States from too many lawyers. And so by this time, very invested in business, and I still in all that. So at about 25 years out of law school, I put my life on hold and went back to school and got a PhD in higher education management, a very focused degree, and at the University of Virginia. And it was a very life-changing experience. I did do some law practice and some alternative dispute resolution to keep the bills paid. But I did earn a fellowship at the university for my PhD, so that helped a fantastic amount. And then I have been a full-time teacher, but I retain my law license and I still do some part-time law practice to help keep the bills paid. But I really enjoy the subject of ethics. And so my paper or my dissertation for my PhD is on teaching business ethics. It's actually a specific dissertation topic, and I explored a lot about the world of ethics. It was very interesting for me because I do not have a philosophy undergraduate program, but here I took some PhD ethics courses with people pursuing a PhD in philosophy, and that was very interesting for me. The hardcore businessman slash lawyer hanging out with these folks that were in the more in the stratospheric level of philosophical ethics, which is not my area. Mine is what people would call applied ethics. This is the stuff that we use every day in business. How do we treat our customers? How do we treat our vendors? How do we treat our employees? And I try and live up to that personally. One simple example is I am a absolute fanatic about paying my bills. And we do have interns, we have people that help us do different things. I own my own office, so we have people cut the grass and clean the house once a week, things like that. And I make sure everybody gets paid every week or very quickly. We pay a lot of people today by Zelle, which means somebody can submit an invoice and they get paid in a day or two, and it's right in their bank account. So that's part of, I know it may sound trivial to some people, but to me, as a small business operator myself of several over my time, it's really important to get paid. It's not an exaggeration. It helps keep your bills paid to keep somebody else's bills paid. So, and I do very, very much enjoy working with my students, and I try and incorporate an ethical line in all of my teaching.
So, David, how do you feel about the ethics in the business world today?
Well, I'm hoping it's a little better than it was in the past. And actually, I'm grading papers for my MBA candidates tonight. Graded a couple papers before I signed on with you. And the students are doing papers on ethical failures. And the two focus seems to be Enron Wilcom, which was 2001, 2002. And of course, Lehman Brothers and the other big meltdowns in 2008, which, the big financial crisis we had in the United States. So I'm hoping that the current crop of business students and the young business owners that I meet at different networkers and things have a more affirmative approach to ethics than what we've seen by the previous generations of failures. And remember, even though these massive failures were so important. The reality is that the vast majority of business people are indeed hardworking, ethical people. And sometimes it's unfortunate because you read, and I'm active on LinkedIn, on social media, and other sites, is people make very sweeping statements about the greed of business and all that. And the reality is really not that. A lot of businesses provide very significant amounts of funds to different charities. Most businesses have adopted specific charities and provide enormous support. Some businesses also will have employee volunteer groups who go out and maintain a piece of the highway near them, or go out and build a house. There's different groups that do that. So I think sometimes business does get a bad rap, but there's certainly a need to continue to emphasize a focus on ethics across the board, and even in our personal lives, how we deal with our friends and how we deal with our neighbors.
Yeah, David, we have a question here. Do you find the ethics are better in small businesses or the corporate world?
I'd like to think it's good across the board, but I think because here's what happened. I think in the small businesses, the majority of small businesses, I think, operate at a very strong ethical level. Honestly, because they probably don't have much choice. Because if they are unethical with a couple people, word gets along out in their community, it's going to shut them down very quickly. Whereas the big businesses, I guess a very quick, relatively recent example, 2015, was the big Wells Fargo deal where the tellers and the people working at the retail end of the bank were being given bonuses for opening bank accounts, and these folks opened a whole bunch of fake accounts in order to make bonuses. It was a very unfortunate situation, but that can happen in a big business, whereas in a small business you would have figured it out in 1 or 2 days. And I'm not sure how long it took Wells Fargo, but it was quite a period of time before people jumped up and said, "Oh my goodness, we've got a $25 million." I forget what the exact amount of scandal was, but it was a huge scandal by the time it hit the public. And I do think that the senior executives at Wells Fargo found it, shut it down, and did the cleanup. But of course, by that time, there had been a tremendous amount of damage. So I think in general, small businesses do need or do tend to operate more ethically, or they tend to go out of business very quickly.
Now, we have another question here about ethics in the educational systems. Do you find that there's enough ethics in the classrooms?
Well, it all depends on what level you're at. It's odd, but I can make the question very personal to Houston, Texas. We have uncovered a scandal in the news here, is that apparently we had a period where teachers in the Houston Independent School District, which is the third or fourth largest school district in the United States, had to be certified, and there's certification exams. And it was just discovered that over 200 teachers had paid other people to take their certification exams. And I'd heard recently, this is still going on, by the way, I'd heard recently that what may have happened is some of these people may have failed the certification exam once or twice, and apparently there's a limit to how many times you can take the exam. And so if they got to the third, opportunity, they may have paid somebody to take it. And of course, it's the typical situation where there was a ringleader teacher, and he had 3 or 4 folks that were very good at these certification exams, and they would get thousands of dollars for taking exams for people. And it's a very sad situation. And of course, we had believe it or not, the ringleader is already out of prison, but about 5 years ago, we had something called Varsity Blues, where a fellow out in California had figured out a way to cheat the system to get the children of wealthy people and celebrities into big name colleges, University of Southern Cal, some of the Ivy Leagues, and so forth, by misrepresenting some of them as athletes who were not athletes, and also people going in and taking the SAT exams for students and other entrance exams. So, unfortunately, we have had some significant issues, but again, the vast majority of students just crank it out. They do whatever prep they can, and they go take the SAT exam or the law boards, med boards, and things like that. But these scandals do not represent the majority of people in there. Now, a different story, which is a much more political one, I don't know if people wanted me to go in that direction, but there is a great deal of criticism today of higher education that it has abandoned basic common sense and how do we deal with people, how do we treat each other, and that the wokeness and the DEI have caused higher education to move away from basic meritocracy, basic here are the things. And I was talking to a parent of a college freshman today, and she was expressing distress at the fact that people are finishing high school and have never done any significant amount of writing or research. And so I don't think that's ethical. I think having stringent standards is really important, and I feel very fortunate. K through 8th grade, I had the old-fashioned nuns with the big black habits and the white Platons and they were a tough bunch. Let me tell you, they were focused on teaching us, and they were very attentive. So that was a great background for me to go into high school. I was fortunate enough to attend some good high schools. I attended one for freshman year and then 3 years of senior high at a different high school. And the teachers were wonderful, focused, and I was doing full research papers with footnotes as a junior in high school. And so when I got to college, writing papers was just what I did, and it helped me do well in my later college. I didn't do particularly well in the science courses, but once I got past that and got into the economics and those advanced courses, a lot of them required papers, and I did very well there. So I'd like to see us refocus K through 12 education to prepare students better for a more ambitious college experience. And I think that's ethics. I think if I applied an ethical analysis to K through 12, I don't consider you an ethical principal or an ethical school system if your kids are coming out of your high schools and cannot do good math and cannot do decent writing and stuff like that. So I'm quite frustrated as a college professor that we're getting students who aren't really ready for college.
Yeah, because I know here in Canada, it's no child gets left behind, right? Whether you do the homework or you understand the question and the problems, you're just going ahead. So the children are going ahead, not understanding, right?
Absolutely, and No Child Left Behind is a very positive theory, but it's been applied wrongly. No Child Left Behind means if we have a child that is not performing well, we spend extra time with that child, and we make sure that that child gets the attention that they need to meet the upper standard and not to lower the standard to the lowest common denominator. And I have a personal experience. My younger son was learning disabled, and I spent an enormous amount of time when he was diagnosed in first grade, and I worked intensively with him from first grade into about the middle of sixth grade. And it was kind of interesting because about the middle of sixth grade, he said, "Dad, I've got it. You don't need to do your homework with me anymore." And I had this sense of withdrawal because it was like, how can he survive without me? and he did really well. In fact, he didn't go direct to college, but after taking a break and working, he did go back to college and finish first in his college class at Texas A&M. So it worked out pretty well. But that's the point: is if you have a child with special needs, and we have autistic children out there, we have children who have dyslexia and other conditions, which is what my son had. There is a reward, and it does take a lot of patience and it takes a lot of focus. There are a lot of, at least in the United States, a lot of public school systems. Ironically, the urban schools have done a better job of providing that. So my son was originally in a suburban school district, and we were able to move him into an urban district, and the urban district had more special ed capacity than some of the suburban districts. Even silly stuff like he was in a suburban school that had no walls. It was just a big open space, and the students were in little groups in a giant room. Well, that sounds like really cool and really modern. When you have a child that has either ADHD or dyslexia, they've got to focus. You've got to have them in a real classroom with walls, and that makes a big difference. In that. So I was able to move him into a school. The other thing that I try to emphasize over and over again is parental involvement.
Absolutely, 100%.
Silly story on my part is, so I have this special ed child, and he's in elementary school at this point. And of course, I look like I do today. I'm wearing a suit. I show up at these what we call ARD meetings, A-R-D, ARD meetings, and the teachers are blown away meeting with me because they'd never had a man attend an ARD meeting, which is just crazy. Is that we've delegated that to the moms. In my case, I was a single dad, and I was going to be the parent who was there, but it never occurred to me when I walked into my first couple of ARD meetings that they'd never had a dad show up to help the kids. And so he got a lot of attention.
You know, that's a good point, because even when my children were in school, it was always me that went to the meetings.
Yeah. Well, I'm pleased to say that Rachel Harrison, who runs my consulting practice, she has a child that needs a little extra attention, and both she and her husband are going to those meetings together, which I think is optimal. I think that's a terrific thing to do, and parents need to understand that investment of time when they're little pays enormous dividends when they get older, and they're not going to come home, and they're not going to be, I think somebody called them the yo-yo children, where they went out and came back home. And I tell people
bring the yo-yo back, David.
I must have been a terrible dad, because my kids, boy, they finished school and they were gone. And I think that's a good thing.
Well, back in the day, we wanted to play outside, right? We waited for the street lights to come on to come in the house. Now it's hard to get a child outside just to play.
A lot of parents are limiting phone time, and the phones have become ubiquitous even for youngsters, and computer time and computer games. And I think it's very, very important that we limit what's called screen time, which can include television. And kids do not have to be in sports per se, but getting out. And certainly some of the things I think are very positive is when I was a little kid, and I was a little kid a long time ago, frankly, the only thing that we had was Little League for boys. And then the girls could go to dance class. And occasionally you'd have a boy that got roped in by his mom who went to dance class. But other than that, it really wasn't much of an involvement. And I think what's very exciting today is we have, despite much of the publicity today, the really little kids are engaged in co-ed soccer and co-ed sports at kindergarten level, sixth, seventh grade, and they get out there and they have a lot more sports options. And then beyond that, especially because of Title IX, which is I'm a big fan of Title IX, is we've got gals playing volleyball, softball, baseball, the whole litany of sports other than football, which I'm not sure. I'm glad neither of my boys played football, and I'm kind of happy about that because I played freshman football as a really skinny kid, and I didn't go out for spring training the next season, and the 240-pound lineman said to me, he said, "Hey, Dave, you coming out for spring practice?" And I said, "No, I think I've got that figured out." So they don't have to play football or even the big sports, but I took up tennis very late in life, sadly. I did not take up tennis until I was already in law school, but I didn't learn the basics that a lot of people learn if they start in later middle school or in high school. So I do encourage people to play sports, but it doesn't have to be football or the big three: football, basketball, and baseball. There's lots of different sports. And again, lots of sports where there's a men's team and the ladies team. And I think that's all very positive. It helps to develop a different type of discipline. I am very critical, however, as an academic, that we're paying such ludicrous salaries to the coaches of the big three sports. The millions and millions of dollars for these coaches, and the professors. When people talk about college costs, I do want to put a little pitch in here and say it is not being given to the faculty. Especially not at a small college like where I teach, it's very, very lean, and yet people say, but these college budgets are gigantic, and they just keep going up and up and up. And a lot of that is not in actual faculty salaries. It's not being used in the classroom, and that to me is kind of an educational scandal. And I'd like to see us focus on taking care of the faculty and focusing on education, and maybe a little less of the mandated overhead that these colleges are spending a lot of money on today.
Well, I think by having a voice and bringing it to attention to everyone, right, we can look at those things and say, let's make some changes. I'm a strong believer, if we don't talk about it and we don't bring it to the table, how can we change it, right?
Definitely, and of course, one of the things that we're having today is, here in the United States, there's a lot of discussion of this Doge operation with Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, and one of the most talked about pieces of that is getting rid of the U.S. Department of Education. And a lot of people have actually accosted me and said, "Dr. Schein, how can you be against the U.S. Department of Education?" And I said, because education at its root is local. It's K through 12, it's parents focusing, and the colleges should be self-supporting between tuition, and if it's a state college, by definition, they have state funding. If it's a private college, they can apply for private grants, but they don't have to have a U.S. Department of Education. The one area where the U.S. Department of Education has become very pivotal, of course, is the student loan program. But the student loan program could also be administered by the U.S. Department of the Treasury or even the Department of Commerce, because it's about moving money. And there's a good handful of people out there who think that student loan business should not be a federal business at all. And so it'd be interesting to see where it goes. But I think the U.S. Department of Education, sadly, has put a lot of pieces into place that have made education overhead higher, but have not improved education itself, and certainly not improved a lot of people like myself as a professor.
Well, Dr. Schein, how did you get from lawyer to professor to an author and get into the politics? Like when Mickey sent me this book, I was like, oh, I got something here that's different. So let's talk about your books a little bit because
Sure.
for the listeners out there that might want to know about these books.
Well, actually, I have been, I'm a lifelong conservative, and when I was in high school, I was described as to the right of Barry Goldwater, who was a very well-known conservative who ran against Lyndon Johnson in 1964 following the assassination of JFK. And so, but I didn't see it as political activity. Actually, I was involved. Philadelphia invented the the block walking program, and that was run by the local Democratic chairman. When I was in college, I lived out in the community in Philadelphia. I didn't live in the dorms or right next to campus, and so I got very integrated in the community. But back then, the difference between Republicans and Democrats was nothing. So in any event, by fast forward to being an attorney, and I went from corporate to private practice, and private practice involves generating your own business. So many of us do run for office, especially if we have any political interest. And so I did run for office on the Republican state rep ticket. I was in the general election in 1992, and actually my kids block walked with me and stuff like that. So we really got out and did the old-fashioned thing of going door to door and talking to people and all that. So it was a tough experience. I learned a dramatic amount about politics, and the kids learned a lot about politics too. None of them are involved in politics, but I had done well in the election. I didn't get elected, but I did well. So 4 years later, I was recruited to run again by the party came out, the local Republican Party came out and said, hey, would you be a candidate for this position? And I reluctantly agreed to that. And it was a very negative experience for a variety of reasons I won't get into. But in any event, I did lose 2 consecutive elections then. And I said, you know what, I've got this figured out. But my campaign manager, who managed 92 and 96, was so frustrated, he totally left politics because of the experience that he had working with my campaign. So in any event, I had a unique experience. I had a long-term relationship with a young lady who was a staffer for Congressman Bill Archer. And it was a very timely period because you may recall that during the Bill Clinton administration that the election in November of 1994 was a Republican sweep, which is one of the things that reshaped the Bill Clinton administration, was having to deal with Republican Senate and Congress. And so anyway, Congressman Archer became chairman of Ways and Means, which is an extremely powerful position. And my lady friend was a staffer for him. And in 1999, we got to move to Washington, D.C. from Houston. And she was there. And I had no official position, but do you remember the cliche, being a fly on the wall?
Yes.
I was the ultimate fly on the wall because I got to go to all of these incredible things. I was feted by lobbyists and all sorts of things. So I got to really see in a unique way how Washington worked on a day-to-day basis. And it really shaped my thinking. Now, it took a long time to get from there to 2 books on the subject. And I'm very serious about my writing. And so the concept for Decline of America, 100 Years of Leadership Failures, really came about in the early 2000s, but it took me to 2015 to write the book, and it took 4 years to write the book and a year in post after it was accepted by the publisher, but before it went out on the market. So that was the book that came out in 2018. And that was a great learning experience by itself, by the way, in terms of working with a publisher. And people don't know what's behind the scenes. So I learned a lot. You be an attorney and a business person, you still don't know a lot about a lot of things. So anyway, I got through that, and I The book was very well received. It's in libraries. It's gotten some interesting. It's still being sold. I got a royalty notice the other day. I think they owe me $50 or something, but they didn't send me a check. They just said, "Oh yeah, we owe you another $50." But it's been kind of interesting. But that really helped the combination of a political interest over a lifetime, the opportunity to see Washington, D.C. very, very close up, and then having, by going in to get my PhD, which I did after Washington, D.C., down at the University of Virginia, gave me the research skills and the things that I needed to be a professional writer. So that's one of the parts of the way that it drove me to do. My dissertation, by the way, was published by a company out of Germany. And then, of course, I have the two other books that we promote. And then the second book came out of my political observations that we must have term limits in America. We have got people who have been in Washington, and this is a bipartisan observation. Whether you're Mitch McConnell or Nancy Pelosi or Joe Biden or Chuck Grassley, I mentioned two of each party, these people have been in Washington too long. They are disconnected from America. One of the things that I observed being in Washington is that their justification for a lot of things is, oh, it's terribly expensive to live in D.C., and I have to have a home in D.C., and I have to have a home in Houston or Wyoming or wherever I live. And the answer is, no, you don't. And what I'd like to do is to cut their salaries, which I think is coming, by the way, and I'd like to say, you can stay in a dormitory. We'll have a dormitory. We'll take over a couple of unused hotels in Washington. We'll turn them into dormitories. You can have roommates, and you belong in your district. You need to report to those people, and for 4 years or 6 years, whatever people vote for, but we must have term limits because these people will not voluntarily, once they get to Washington and they get infected with Washington fever, it's very hard to get them to give up that power. It's not about the money. Many of them have made amazing amounts of money. People often mention the Pelosi family and the Biden family and Mitch McConnell, that these people have surprising amounts of money considering that they've been on a federal paycheck with no other visible means of support. Why do they have such vast amounts of money? So just a question. But in any event, I think, but that's what drove it. But my idea of the book, the second book, Bad Deal for America, it's based on playing cards. So there's 26 Republicans and 26 Democrats. Again, it's a bipartisan book. And we use exact quotes, things that these folks actually said. And it's designed, when you read this stuff, you're like, this person actually said this? And in fact, he's now deceased, but there was a congressman in California who happened to be a Democrat, and he said some things that were so offensive that we didn't put him in the book because we didn't want the book to get banned. But I mean, and again, I'm not going to share them on the air tonight, but I mean, it's like, what on earth were we paying these people for? What type of ethical relationship do these people have to say such incredibly stupid things? And so it's designed to be a kind of a tongue-in-cheek humor, but to make the point. And we tell the people on each of the politicians what party they were and how many years they had been in Washington. Now, some of them are relatively young. I think we had AOC or a couple of the fairly new folks in the book, but most of the people in the book have been in Washington a very long time. And frankly, it's time to sweep up and get some new blood in there, but not new blood that then occupies for another 25 or 30 years. Let's have some turnover there. And Miss Liz, you guys up in Canada could do the same thing, right?
Yeah, we got our own little mess going on over here in Canada.
That's what we're hearing. I understand the big dude was down in Florida kissing the ring.
Oh yeah, he was kissing all right.
Well, let's just say he was kissing the ring, okay?
Yeah, yeah. I, Dr. Schein, I also found that you did some work with Texas Against Public Smoking and then the
Yes.
group against public smoking. Tell us a little bit about that because when I found that, I was like, oh, what is this?
Well, first of all, it's time related. So when I was, first of all, my mom was a lifetime non-smoker, vehemently against smoking, which certainly influenced me. My dad my dad joined the military the first time he could, which was 1946, so right after World War II, and he began smoking in the military, which was extremely common back then. In fact, cigarettes were almost free, not free, but pretty close. And so he was a smoker, and then he quit smoking around 1954-55, which is before the Surgeon General's report. And he did it for financial reasons, which I find hilarious because the cigarettes were so cheap. But I remember he bought a beautiful lamp, I think it was imported from Switzerland or someplace, and put it in the living room and said, "This is what I bought with my savings from having stopped smoking," which I thought was a very thing. The other thing is that having smoked for about 8 or 9 years, he was cold turkey. He just said, one day, I'm not going to keep burning money. I'm going to do that. So that had a positive influence on me, of course, as well. But in any event, fast forward to get to law school, which is years later in mid 1970s, late 1970s, is smoking in public was a major irritation to me. And I used to fly in airplanes where they would have smokers sitting in a few rows and then non-smokers, and it was ludicrous because you cannot smoke in an airplane without polluting everybody on the plane. So I was very happy when we stopped having smoking on airplanes. People don't most of your listeners probably don't remember when people were allowed to smoke on airplanes, but people smoked in restaurants, people did all sorts of stuff. So in any event, taps was, I love that term. That's the music that's played at military funerals. Taps, Texans Against Public Smoking, and we were part of an association called GASP, GASP, Group Against Smoking in Public. And all I can say is we were incredibly successful, and we helped to put additional emphasis on the Surgeon General's report, which was in 1964 when they came out and said, "Hey, guess what? Smoking's really bad for you," and and then we began limiting advertising smoking in 1965. But it's still a controversial issue. In fact, there was a case just this week, and I have a series called Business Law 101, and we've recorded one on this case. But what happened is it's about flavored vaping. Now, tobacco products cannot be sold to minors, so why are we having cherry flavored and fruit flavored vaping? And the idea is it's going to get to these kids and get them addicted to tobacco, to nicotine and so forth. So what happened is the court, the Federal Trade Commission, the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration here in the United States, now controls tobacco advertising and things like this. So the Food and Drug Administration said to Big Tobacco, you cannot sell this children's flavored vaping. We're not going to let you do it. So Big Tobacco took the case to the court system. They won, believe it or not, at the first level trial court. They lost at the appeals level, and the Supreme Court just bounced them. The United States Supreme Court said, no, the Food and Drug Administration does have administrative control over this. And the argument by Big Tobacco was First Amendment. We have a freedom of speech, and our freedom of speech concludes it. The legal correction is that businesses like tobacco companies have less freedom of speech than people. So we can regulate business, is what they say. So anyways, it's a pretty interesting area, but we have made enormous strides. I'm in a social group. I like most people my age, I know many couples and associate with people, and it's just extremely rare to have somebody in my entire social circle who still smokes. And so we've accomplished a tremendous amount. Doesn't mean we're real healthy, because as you know, the next big thing is of course diabetes, and we're talking about 1/3 of our adult population having diabetes, and that's a stunning and scary statistic. So it's cigarettes is one thing, but we have a long way to go for public health.
Absolutely. And for me, I'm the only non-smoker in all of my family, so I have all the smokers around me. So I'm always usually by myself in the house because no one's allowed to smoke in my house.
Good
You
for
know,
you,
so
and maybe
but
you'll
everybody's
convert someone.
outside smoking and but it's the smell, right? It comes in and it's like, oh, but we have to be those voices and the changes. And when I seen that taps and gaps, I was like, oh, this is interesting. I like getting that information out there because there's a lot of people that don't know about this information. And if you'd like to know more about it, check them out, because I think what you did, Dr. Schein, is amazing. Like, we have to be the voice for the change, and that. I want to lighten up our little chat here. We got just a couple minutes left before we wrap up. I want to get into your hobbies because I found that you like opera.
I will be going to opera tomorrow night. I'll be going to see The Little Prince at the local opera company. Houston is very blessed. We have one of the best opera companies in the world. That's the Houston Grand Opera, HGO, and they do 6 or 7 productions a year. I've attended both their big productions this year, and they're doing, to attract people to opera. They're doing a Broadway show. So they did Sound of Music last year, and they're doing West Side Story this year. That'll be in February this year. And we have a little bitty opera company that performs at a former church literally up the street from where I am in the Greater Houston Heights. And they do a very good job. It's beautiful music, and it's very accessible. It's not nearly the high cost of the big opera company, and so it's kind of nice to support them also. And one of my other hobbies is to do Argentine tango.
I was going to just get into the tango. See, this girl did her homework. I did my homework. I got it right here on the paper.
What can I say? Well, I was single, and I did not have a girlfriend at the time. And when I came out of my PhD, things had changed a lot in my life. And so I went to a meetup group to do salsa or something. And I did some various groups and classes and stuff for different ballroom and things like that. That a lot of people do. Adult singles will do things like that. And one of the people that I was friends with, who was a regular at one group, said, "Hey, why don't we go check out this Argentine tango?" I'm like, okay. And so I got hooked. Argentine tango can be very complicated. It doesn't have to be, but there's more to it than, say, doing routine ballroom waltz or things like that. And so the higher level of experience. So from 2012 to 2020, I actually progressed to being a very solid intermediate dancer. And then sadly, COVID hit, and especially with tango, with legitimate Argentine tango, your partner is face to face with you. You really can't do that with COVID running around. So I wish I had returned quicker. I really was out of it for about almost 3.5 years. So I started back again about 6 months ago, and it's starting to really come back recently. But it was a disappointment for me that I was out of it just long enough that I lost some of the more advanced moves that I knew how to do. But I'm working hard at it, and of course you've got the music of it, and you have the socialization of dancing with different partners, and you generally dance with a different partner every so many songs, and so you don't go and just. Some couples do go together and dance only with themselves, but that's not the norm. The norm is you go with your partner, but then you rotate who you dance with.
Well, ballroom dancing is like riding a bike, right? If you stop riding a bike for a couple of years, once you get back on the bike, you get right back into it.
The ballroom, in certain parts of it, yeah, because I learned how to do waltz and certain things as a kid, and I can pretty much go in and do waltz anytime.
Yeah, I used to do ballroom dancing, I think back in 2006, and I just loved it. I found that it was relaxing, the connection, the socializing, and you always had a different partner, a dance partner as well. Uh, so, what has dancing taught you about yourself, Dr. Schein?
Well, I guess I'm not as attractive as I'd like to be because, I sometimes get turned down when I ask. In tango, the tradition is the man always asks the woman. It's a little bit different, and they have something called a cabeceo, which is you look at a woman that you'd like to dance with, and if she nods at you, cabeceo, you get to go do the next tanda or next group of songs with her. If she looks away, you may not be dancing this set,
Is he looking at me?
That's exactly what they do. How'd you know that, Miss Liz? Yeah, I didn't
dancing
see
back in the
that.
day. I like salsa. My favorite was salsa and the foxtrot. But yeah, I was that girl that would be like, no.
Well, but the positive part is it does give the ladies the power because they can decide who they want to dance with, and not all of the leaders are male, by the way. My partner, she is very, very good, and she does lead sometimes. And there are several women that are in lessons with me today who are specifically learning to lead, and that's great. And of course, they do encourage women to learn about leading because that makes them better partners, better followers if they're dancing with a person where they are the follower because they understand what it looks like on our end. But the tango community took a big hit during COVID, but I would say things in Houston are really blossoming. One of the most interesting things is we're having a tango party. Is called a milonga, and we're having a milonga at the Museum of Fine Arts. Unfortunately, it's tomorrow night, and I'm at the opera. But
Can't be in two places at once, right?
that's right. But the milongas at the museum are very nice and attract a very wide crowd from the greater Houston area. And the Museum of Fine Arts Houston is a very fine facility also.
Oh, that's really cool. So, Dr. Schein, do you have any events coming up or anything you'd like to get out
Let's
there for
see.
the listeners?
Well, I am encourage people to look at the two books if they just do anything. They go to our website, which you have displayed, ClaremontManagementGroup.com, or they go to Amazon under my name. Both the books I have out are available there. A Cheap Education is not ready for prime time, so I hope to get that out soon. And I am doing presently 4 different webcasts, and people can find them by just Googling my name and Saving America or Business Law 101. And I also do Starstruck, and I do Unscripted Politics. So I'm busy. I'm working at it.
Yeah, you're pretty busy there. I found a couple things here, and I was like, "Whoa, he's pretty busy there." So when you're doing the webcast, what days can people find those?
Well, the Business Law 101 is daily, runs after the news on the Brushwood Apple Network, and Saving America airs on Saturday on both the Brushwood Network and on Global TV and Radio, USA Global TV and Radio. And all of this stuff gets stored on those individual websites as well as YouTube and Spotify. So I'm very easy to find.
Awesome. Well, it was a real pleasure having you on Tea Time and sharing your tea tonight and getting into the little different conversations. Yes, Miss Liz likes to spill the tea and go in twists and turns, and I like a little twisted tea once in a while. So thank you again, Dr. Schein, for joining me, and thank you guys for tuning in and supporting Miss Liz. We have 8 tea times left before Miss Liz wraps it up, so be sure to check out all those tea times. There's over 400 different interviews, all walks of life, all different topics. I guarantee there's one tea time that you'll enjoy. Check that out. Go over to Miss Liz's YouTube channel again, Miss Liz's Tea Times. You can see it on the screen here. And also go to Miss Liz's website, www.misslizsteatime.com, and you'll see all the other stuff that Miss Liz gets to do with individuals across the globe. So there's so much more than just a podcast. So check that out. And thank you again for tuning in. And thank you again, Dr. Schein, for joining me and having tea. And I want to wish you guys all a beautiful weekend. Next week we have 7 tea times in a row. So we have Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. And then on December 19th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we have the reunion show. And there is confirmed over 50 different guests that will be returning from all different seasons. So it should be an enjoyable evening. Miss Liz has a couple surprises as well. So stay tuned for that. Until then, keep spilling your tea, keep being true, and we're going to make a difference with real life tea and stories and words.